with the recording if you want to view it again later. And make sure that you follow along with us on social so you can get more updates about chats like this and other awesome things that we do at PowerToFly, and so that we can keep you in the fold in the community. So with that, I will first introduce Sheneya, which the first thing I need to ask Sheneya is if I'm actually saying your name correctly, because I don't want to mispronounce it.
Yes, you are. Thank you for asking.
So Sheneya, there's a ton of info here, but I can't introduce you any better than you can introduce yourself. And I don't want to do all the talking. So please tell us about yourself.
Perfect. So hello, everyone who's on this call. Thank you to the PowerToFly team for having me back again. Love everything that you guys do. So hello, everyone. I am Sheneya Wilson, aka the People CPA. I am a certified public accountant in the state of New York. I have my company, Fola Financial, which I've started 3 years ago. I provide bookkeeping, tax services, which include tax preparation and tax planning, and consulting to small business owners, entrepreneurs, and other just, professionals who need financial help. Aside from that, I am also a PhD student at Rutgers University. I study accounting and information systems, and I do teach as an accounting professor. I teach Intro to Financial Accounting currently. Then lastly, I'm a real estate investor. So I do most of these things because I don't want to be a person who's like preaching about wealth and money if I'm not on that journey myself. And that's pretty much me. Oh, my favorite quotes there, which I do love and will love to share out loud. It states, education is the most powerful tool of which you can use to change the world. Everything that I do is in part to educate, because I do feel like it's not about what you can show somebody, what you can tell them. If they don't actually understand the knowledge and can figure out how to implement it again in the future themselves, I didn't do a good job with educating them. So I think it is pretty powerful because, again, you can teach your horse to drink water, and that's the goal, not to bring it to it, right?
Absolutely. I love it. And I can say as a financial advisor, that was the hardest part. It's like I could preach it all day long, but if they weren't getting it, it made it really hard for them to progress. So
right.
Awesome. Totally with you. All right. So I don't know why I'm having a hard time like clicking through slides today. The simple tech stuff. Candace.
Yes.
So glad to have you here. Would be very happy to have you introduce yourself as well. Because again, I think you could probably do it better than I could.
Yes, I'm glad to be back. Thank you guys again for having me. So I'm Candace McGee. I am a money coach, and I help mainly millennial women cultivate their own personal financial systems. So that's pretty much just helping them understand how there's more than one component to fixing your finances. It's not just about budgeting. It's not just about investing in the next big thing. There are a lot of different resources that go into cultivating that healthy ecosystem. So I'm really passionate about that. I talk about money all day, every day. My clients can tell you I love talking about it. And also, like it says here, I'm really passionate about ice cream. So that's enough about me.
I think that those are all reasonable things to be passionate about. Have the money, buy more ice cream. It all makes sense to me. Awesome. So glad to have both of you with us today. But I'm actually checking on time. We're about 9 minutes in, so let's just dive into these questions and get as many answered as possible, so we can go through this. So this is kind of the quick view, but we're going to go through them one at a time. And like I said, we'll go through these here, but if you want to ask your own question, feel free to come off mute. Or you can send a question in the chat and I'll make sure to read it aloud so that we can work through it. So first of the pre-submitted questions. I would like to start investing, but I don't know where to begin and money is limited. My goal for 2021 is to gain more than one passive income stream. Where should I begin? Candace, you're already off mute, so I'm gonna pitch this over to you first.
Okay, no problem. So with starting off with investing, of course, I always tell everyone to research. So like I mentioned, we don't just want to invest in the thing that's hot. We want to know why we're investing in this company. We want to make sure we have some type of knowledge about how they work internally, like our core competencies that we have on these companies. We need to know that before we start investing, right? And if you're talking about building passive income, one of the ways to do that with investing is to purchase things that pay you dividends, and kind of stack your portfolio in a way where you're getting paid dividends each month. That is one way to do it. So if that's the route that you're trying to take, if they're talking about, investing in the market, then that's another part of research, is to see, who's paying the dividends and when they're paying them, and trying to stagger it so that they get the dividends paid again to them each month.
Awesome. Sheneya, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I guess the easiest thing I feel like when it comes down to figuring out how to make passive income is seeing what current skills you currently have and figuring out multiple ways to monetize it, right? Because most people don't want to just jump into entrepreneurship or jump into investing if they're not comfortable with it. But there's ways to make money if you are honing in on what your skill is. So for example, I'm an accountant. I figured out 3 different ways to make money from being an accountant. It's through educating, it's through teaching, it's through providing services and products. And so take a look at what you currently do. So whether you are in HR or whether you are in customer service, and figure out how you can monetize your skill, because more than likely there's people on this earth that's going to pay to get that knowledge that you have. So why not figuring out how to monetize that first, so it doesn't feel like it's too foreign to you? Like, entrepreneurship is not easy. It's not cute all the time. Neither is investing, especially people who saw the fluctuation in the markets recently. So again, just think about that. Like, figure out what current skills that you have and how can you monetize them further, because your job is monetizing it, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's such a good point. It's really tough for people, especially when money is tight, to think about, well, how can I get passive income when I don't have a lot of extra money to begin with? So it's important to think about, okay, so what skills do you have and how can you do them in a way that then generates a passive income stream outside of maybe investing, which, Candace, to your point, like, dividends are great for passive income, but if money's tight, it's also hard to enter into investing at the same time. So it's a really interesting question, and I think both of you had such great points on that.
So percent of sales.
Let's see what else we've got. What's the recommended emergency fund to have prior to starting to invest? Sheneya, I'll kick it off to you this time.
Okay. So I would say, people say typically 3 to 6 months. I'm going to say max that out in 6 months, because obviously look what happened. We're in a whole pandemic now. So for that reason, 6 months is pretty comfortable before you start investing, because what you don't want to do is be gambling with your last, right? It puts you not in a good state mentally, and everyone knows investing is based off of emotion. So if you're not in a good mental state to deal with those emotions, that up and down fluctuation, you're not going to make really rational decisions, and it may affect the way you are benefiting from investing. You may take a loss because you were just acting super irrationally. So for that reason, I would say you want to make sure that your head is clear. So I would say 6 months is a pretty amount of saving. When I say 6 months, I mean 6 months of your living expenses. So calculate how much you pay in rent per month, how much you buy in food per month. If you travel to work, save that as well. And then leave extra buffer for like toiletries, especially because we're women. Figure out what that amount is, multiply it by 6, and that's a good comfortable amount for you to have saved before you start investing.
Candace, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, no, I agree with her. I was going to say 3 to 6 months. People who have a more of a risky lifestyle, something, maybe you're a contractor and your money fluctuates a lot, or if you have children and a lot of expenses related to them, then you may want to save a bit more. You may want to go the 9 to 12 month route, but really 3 to 6 months, especially for people who don't really have a high risk lifestyle. You have a 9 to 5, especially right now, you're teleworking, your expenses for your car, all of that is kind of low. So you may feel comfortable with like she mentioned, just having that 3 to 6 months, because you don't want to be investing anything that you have to be forced to sell because you're short on cash. That is the worst position to be in. So definitely make sure you have however many months you're comfortable with, but I agree with her with the 3 to 6 as a good starting point.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the rule of thumb I always knew was 3 to 6 months. And, again, I think especially looking at the circumstance we're in right now, when things are just a bit more uncertain than I think we've all felt in quite a while, being a little bit on the higher end of that buffer, especially if we have kids, especially if we have, maybe we're not regular, like maybe a salaried employee, but a contractor, an independent contractor, that you kind of shy on the higher side of that, to make sure that you're not in a situation where you're taking this additional stress on top of everything going on right now, right? So just kind of a follow-up question to go along with this, because circumstances are so crazy right now. And people are probably turning a bit more to relying on their emergency funds. I got a question in the chat that was, how long do utilities, car payments, loans typically give you for a grace period? So times are tight for a lot of people. A lot of people are trying to figure out, how can I make sure that I'm okay this month, that I'm okay for the next 90 days? And you kind of have to work within what is allowable. So are you guys seeing that different lenders, utility providers are working with people like us as we're trying to make sure that we're keeping things moving during COVID right now?
Yeah, so different companies were offering different things. We saw that the thing where the auto insurance companies were offering a certain percentage off, or were letting people change their policies altogether to lower their premiums. Utility companies they had their programs, landlords had their programs. But the thing is, for one, to communicate, right? Don't just ignore it. That's only going to make the problem worse. I've seen it happen, makes it worse. But the thing also to remember is that the money is still owed, right? So if you have some money, when the stimulus check came in, or if you have unemployment and all these things, to make sure that you're taking care of these responsibilities. And even if they do give you some kind of grace, if you do actually have the money there to cover it, to consider that, because it's going to just decrease the amount of stress that you have on the back end, even though you have this grace up front. And even with like forbearances that people were in with their mortgages, that doesn't cover your escrow account. So if anybody knows about that, that's where your taxes and insurance go. So you may have this break on your principal and interest, but the bank may not tell you, oh, you need to make sure you still have this money to cover your taxes and insurance at the end of the year, or you're going to owe us. So it's like you have to communicate and make sure that you're crystal clear on what your responsibility is, and do the best with it that you can from that point.
Required adjustment.
Oh, you're on pause. Mute, Abigail. But I would just say, I feel like Candace's answer was very thorough. There's like no one size fit all with how these companies reacted, but the most important thing that she mentioned was communicating. Many times people just don't communicate, and then now like you're facing a foreclosure, or now you're getting your car towed away because you didn't communicate. Especially now, I think these companies are being very, very lenient. So why not hit them up and say, hey, I am struggling. I tried. I've been a good customer up until now, but as you know, things are hard. Can you please help in this way? Even if it's 1 month to catch you up, like it doesn't hurt to ask.
You're right. I was on mute. I was just asking if you had anything to add. So there you go. No, I completely agree. I think communication is the big thing, right? So, and what do we do as humans? We don't want to deal with something makes us uncomfortable or uncertain. Money is tight, and we have to deal with that mortgage or that rent payment or that utility payment or whatever it is. And so we avoid it. So we don't communicate, right? And then it just gets worse. But, I could say now, I feel like if anyone takes one thing away from this, I hope it's that you will communicate with those who you have a financial relationship with your credit card companies, with your lenders, because, you know, they're not all out to get you. Like, yes, companies are for profit and that's a thing, whatever. They're not all out to get you. If you get on the phone and talk to them, often there are programs that maybe they don't advertise, but that they have that they can work with you. So, you know, I hope people will utilize that because I think that's a really, really good point, really important. All right. Next question. What advice would you give to someone who is debating between paying off debt and investing?
I can go. It's fine. I can go first. It's fine.
Okay.
The rule of thumb, like what people say basically is high interest debt, like over 6% should be prioritized, because when you're comparing it to the S&P 500 returns or, the historical returns with investing, 6%, if you're paying more of that in interest, or if you take that money and put it in the market, you're eating away pretty much at your profits because of this high interest debt that you have. So if you have, a 401k, a lot of times your companies give you a match. So that's the one exception, because that's pretty much free money that you would otherwise be leaving on the table. So if you can afford it, you can contribute enough to get that match, and then make sure that you're using the rest to take care of, credit card debt, or, car loans that you have at crazy interest rates, or whatever you have that could possibly be eating away at your return. So that's my advice, the 6% plus, or if you just feel like, oh my gosh, you're so overwhelmed with debt, then that's going to be your priority. Because when I invest my money in whatever way I'm choosing to invest it, it's money that I'm not emotionally tied to, and it's money that I know I don't need. So if your emotions are more like, okay, this debt is really, it's a chip on my shoulder, it's weighing me down every day, the thought of it overwhelms me, it's not going to be smart for you to put that money into investing, because your debt is the priority for you at this time.
I think that's a really good point, Candace. I think a lot of people forget about that factor, that emotional tie that can maybe not make us make the best decisions around our money.
Right.
Sheneya, what do you think?
So I guess to me, this is just my philosophy. Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. Everything comes down to your preference as a person. But as a CPA, someone who kind of understands the importance of capital, I kind of coach my clients on how to make more money first before paying down debt. Because what you don't want to do is not be able to save because you're paying debt. The whole goal of finance is you want to be able to get paid, pay yourself first, put something away to save, and then go ahead and pay down debt, right? And I love that because it's like, you don't ever want to, like, God forbid, like, pass away tomorrow and all you did with your money was pay down debt. Like, now you can't leave nothing down to your kids. You have nothing to put in your, in your trust or your estate, whatever it may be, because all you do is pay down debt, right? So I feel like if you're younger, if you're on the younger side, I would say to figure out ways to make more money, because it's easier. And for me, I feel like it's easier if you pay down debt with that money that you earn from investing. So now it's not coming from your paycheck, so I love the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think he did a great job in explaining how the movement between your cash and income versus your liability should flow. So his philosophy, which is kind of where my idea comes from, is that you should earn money, invest that money, then use that invested money to go ahead and pay down your debt and liabilities, right? So again, you're paying that down with money that you earned, but not from working, right? Because remember, when we work, we're trading our time for money. When you're investing, you're just trading your money for the most part. So I'd rather pay down my debt with money that I earn from investing rather than money that I earn from working. Money that you earn from working should be in your pocket. You deserve that, right? Money from investing should cover your living expenses. That's the whole goal eventually. But it should cover your living expenses, things like debt. Because again, you don't want to be able to, you don't want to ever be stuck and not be able to invest because all you did was pay down debt. You never know, if you invest now $1,000 and now 2021, it turned to 10K. I'd rather have invested that $1,000 than put it towards debt, especially in this climate now. I feel like everyone should be focused on how to get more capital more than anything.
No, I think that that's a really interesting point, because I always feel like that there is that strong tension, right, between debt and investing. And in an ideal scenario, Sheneya, I completely agree with you. If you can get your investments to pay down your debt so that you can focus on, like, I'm living my life and my money's over there paying down the debt and growing on the side, like, awesome. Like, yes, because it helps to isolate some of what you feel in your emotional money, paying for rent, paying for food, everything every day, from some of the bigger stuff going on that helps to set you up for the future, right? I think that sometimes the difficulty is when you're just getting started and trying to find the little pieces of money to say, all right, I have $30 a month. I have $50 a month. I finally am at a point when I have that. I've never invested before. I'm 25 years old. I'm 28 years old, whatever it is. I've never invested before. Do I start that? Or I have student loan debt and that's sitting at, 7.25% or whatever. How to make that decision. And Candace, I think to your point, that's some of that, when you're thinking, all right, if average stock market returns are 7% or 6%, and I have this debt sitting at 6-7%, you kind of lose out on the gain if you're investing instead of paying down the debt. And I think that's a very personal thing that people have to work to get educated on. How does this work so that they can make the right decision for themselves? So I strongly feel like there is actually not a right answer for this, and it's absolutely dependent on that individual person and their situation. So either way, interesting stuff. Very glad to discuss it. All right, let me scoot over to the next slide. So I've got the question here. How can I even think about investing, starting a retirement or emergency fund when I'm drowning in other debt? So this is very similar to what we just discussed. And, I think that, I want to make sure that we get to all the questions. So I think we pretty much covered this. Is there anything else that you guys want to add, or we can kind of hit some more questions? I see Candace shaking your head. Yeah, I agree. I think that we covered this pretty well, and I definitely want to make sure that we get to some other questions. I did just have a question come in privately to me in the chat that says, I don't understand where to invest. And like I said before, when you're brand new and you're just starting out, that is such an overwhelming question, right? Like, how do you even get into the stock market? People are into the stock market. What does that mean? How do you do it? Do you just walk up to Wall Street and like throw some money in the air? Candace, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so if you're talking about investing in the stock market, then yes, you can do it with a brokerage account, which is, what we call it. It's a brokerage account. So you would choose your firm. You could use TD Ameritrade. You could use Charles Schwab. You could use Betterment. Those are some really popular platforms. I'm not an endorser or like an affiliate for anybody. So I'm not going to tell you, you just choose one that you like, you open it up. And then, before doing that though, again, it's always going to go back to what your research, right? Why do you want to invest in a certain company? Why do you want to invest at all? And what is the goal that you're trying to get out of it? But the physical way to actually do it is to open up a brokerage account. Or, a lot of people invest in their Roth IRA. You can purchase things in the market there as well. But yes, Fidelity.com, TDAmeritrade.com, Robinhood app, but they've been having some issues lately with like user privacy and hacking and things like that. So I have an account with them. I'm considering transferring my money out of it. But Acorns, those things that kind of get you started, they invest your spare change for you when you make purchases, stuff like that. So If you wanted to start out something easier, the apps are good. They're typically user friendly versus, if you don't feel like you want to go through the whole process of like, going through TD Ameritrade, and that feels like too big for you, the apps can be helpful.
I keep forgetting I'm on mute. I should probably just stop. It's pretty quiet here. I just am like, no, go on mute. Sheneya, are you still with us? I know your camera's gone. You have to.
Yes, I am. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay. Okay.
No, I was
All
going
right.
to say is, kind of as a follow-up to what Candace was saying, you can invest in the stock market through a brokerage account. You said before that you're a real estate investor. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about how other types of investing works and what that means?
Mm-hmm. So, in terms of the stock market specifically, aside from opening a brokerage account and doing it yourself, you can go ahead and think about using a robo-investor. That's pretty popular now. These type of, I'm trying to make the lighting better. Sorry. These type of robo-investors basically follow an algorithm. So whether the stock market is going up or down, they'll ride on the trends. So now you can have a little bit more not guarantee, but comfort that the robo-investor would do the job for you, and you don't have to worry about investing like yourself, because day trading is like a skill on its own. It's very hard, and you don't want to sit at the screen all day trading, especially if you have a 9-to-5 job or if you have kids. So robo investing is like pretty popular. Aside from that, using mutual funds, where it's like a bunch of stocks, instead of you just buying one stock, there's multiple.
Yeah, no, I actually just saw in the comments someone talking about stock slices instead of purchasing a whole share, which I have a feeling that Cindy, you're talking about a mutual fund, because that's pretty much what it is. I always think of it as, you can either buy an apple or, an individual share, or you can buy an apple pie and you get a slice, and then you get the sugar, the dough, the cinnamon, the apple, you get a little bit of everything. That's
right.
How it works.
Especially apps like Stockpile and Robinhood now allow you to also buy fractional shares, right? So instead of buying a full share of Apple, you can buy just $50 worth of that stock. Or instead of buying Amazon, you can buy just $100 worth of that stock and let that grow instead of feeling like you have to buy the full stock in full, which is a good way for people to save, because I kind of recommend people to start with like $50 a week of buying a fractional share of a major company that you're gonna grow, that's gonna grow. So an Apple, an Amazon, a Tesla, and start there in increments. Before you know it, you'll have a full share of that company.
Sure, absolutely. I have to say, like it's interesting as a financial advisor, and I'm sure that both of you have gotten this in the working in the financial sector. It's a very conservative mindset typically on like how you approach money and how you do things. Because I always, especially when people are starting out, will say, hey, mutual funds, ETFs are a great way to get started because they have that diversity as opposed to buying the individual share. But that said, when I started, I bought like 3 shares of a company that I liked, and that's how I got started, and that's how I learned how to do it. So, it's always just interesting to see how people are learning and getting involved. So let me see where we're at in time. We're okay on time. So I did also see someone ask, and I wanted to kind of go back to it, of can you invest from your Roth IRA? And I think that that's a good reset point for us to say, okay, hang tight. There is such things as a Roth IRA, savings accounts, things like that, and then brokerage brokerage versus a savings account versus a checking account, Roth IRA versus a regular traditional IRA versus a regular brokerage account that's doesn't have tax advantages, and kind of explaining the difference between, the way I think of it is the basket and what sits inside it. What is the shell? Is it a savings account? Is it a checking account? Is it a brokerage account? and how does it function inside of it. So do you guys want to kind of explain like how can a Roth IRA, how can you invest from a Roth IRA versus, I'm having a hard time explaining this because the way I think of it, when I got my first IRA, it was a CD. So you wouldn't invest from a CD because a CD isn't an investment tool. But Roth IRAs can be an investment tool. You can have a Roth IRA that you can invest from. So Candace, do you want to explain a little bit about this to kind of clarify?
So a Roth IRA is a type of retirement account, right? So one of the perks of that is typically, when you retire, if, there are all these different like legal loopholes and things, right? But the idea is that when you take money out of it later, that you're not going to pay taxes on the gains that you have because you're putting the money in there as post-tax income. So it's not pre-tax like with your 401k. So for someone who's thinking, okay, you know what, I'm going to be, a real estate investor, I'm going to have a lot of assets and businesses or whatever by the time I retire, it's very beneficial for me maybe to put money in an IRA for later. But with the brokerage account, like we talked about, Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade, things like that, those aren't retirement accounts, right? So that's money you're putting the money in post-tax, and when you get into it and you start getting your capital gains and you have actual like realized capital gains and things like that, then that's going to be reported. The Internal Revenue Service can get involved and all that stuff. And I'm sure Sheneya can speak more on that as the CPA that she is. But yeah, so it's a little bit different. Like typically with like in my Roth IRA, I invest more long-term. I'm more hands-off with that. It's a lot of mutual funds there, baskets of things, but where I want to play around a little bit or where I want to be more hands-on, then that's going to be in my taxable brokerage account. That's just not, I could hold it for retirement, but it's more easily accessible to me because it's not a retirement account.
I think that's that makes sense. That's how I think about it too, the Roth IRA versus a non-tax advantage brokerage account. But Sheneya, do you also want to talk about we're starting to veer off a little bit, but I think this is so important, is IRA, you've got a Roth, you've got a traditional, or people can choose to invest in a regular brokerage account that doesn't have those tax advantages. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk from the tax perspective why someone might go in a certain avenue?
Yeah. Okay. So essentially the whole idea of the Roth is that when you retire, your income is going to be a lot lower, and thus you're going to pay a lower amount of income tax when you pull it out, right? Because again, so basically between like having a traditional IRA versus a Roth IRA, it depends on whether you're going to get taxed on it or taxed now, right? So if you are the person who thinks, all right, when I retire, I'm going to retire with $1 million a year in retirement income, then maybe having an account that's going to get taxed when you pull it out later is not your best play. Most people retire on a way less salary, which is why they put it in a more tax advantageous account, because they're assuming that when they pull it out, it's going to be at a lower tax rate than it would be if they were taxed on it now, right? So for example, like with 401ks, we pay tax on that now, and it grows, and then we don't pay tax on it when we pull it out, right? Or vice versa. Am I getting jacked up?
It depends on what kind of 401k, because they do have Roth 401ks now too.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right. So, essentially it depends on your income level, right? So if you're a person who's making a lot more now, you may want to put your money in tax accounts and have them be tax deferred so you can pay taxes later because your income now is really high. And then on the contrary, if you're going to retire with pretty high income, you may want to pay that tax now because you're paying a less effective tax rate because you're making a lot less. So ultimately it comes down to your income expected in the future versus where you are now. And from that, you'll figure out which account is better. For most people, though, that get like financial planning, they end up doing both, where they are investing in accounts that do get taxed now and taxed later, or vice versa, because what you want to do is hedge at the same time if you can, because we don't know what if the tax rates go up by the time you retire. I mean, Joe Biden is proposing to increase the top rate to 39.5%. What if it's 45% in the future? Would you have rather pay the tax now at your 25% income tax level or your 37% tax level, as opposed to paying it when it hit 45%? So again, most people hedge and do both because, again, we don't know what the future is going to hold.
That's a really good point too. All right, let's get into some more of these questions. Right. At what point is it worth it to get an accountant? How complicated a tax situation should you have before considering that option? Sheneya, I will go right to you.
Okay. I get this question a lot because some people are like, oh, can I just use TurboTax? And I have nothing against it if you have a simple return, right? By simple, I mean maybe just 1 or 2 W-2s, all in the same state, maybe a dependent. If your tax situation becomes complex, so say, for example, you work in multiple states now, you're a traveler, you're a consultant, or you're a nurse, and you work in 3 different states throughout the year. TurboTax does not do a great job at separating state returns. There's a special manual allocation that needs to be done by an accountant. So clients ultimately call me after they try to file a TurboTax, and they're like, hey, I owe the state, $5,000 I never owed before. And I'm like, well, if I look at your return, it's because TurboTax did not correctly allocate it, right? So depending on your situation, you want to make sure you get an accountant if your tax life changes drastically, right? For example, if you have a brokerage account, you may not want to depend on TurboTax, because sometimes if you have a brokerage statement, so say you got dividends or interest or capital gains, your basis, aka the amount that you're using to compute your capital gain, may not be on that brokerage statement, and your accountant has to physically go ahead and calculate that, right? Or if you're itemizing your deductions and you're trying to figure out how much charitable expense you can deduct your mortgage. Some clients who have a mortgage deduct the traditional, which would be property taxes and mortgage, but they'll leave out PMI or they'll leave out points because they're not familiar with these terms. They don't know where to put it on the return. So if you're in that point where you're itemizing deductions, if you have a business and your tax is becoming a lot more complex, or you're investing, you have real estate property, you want to seek the help of an accountant, right? If it's simple, just W-2s, 1 state, 1 dependent, you're fine with the software like TurboTax.
Awesome. Candace, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I agree with everything she said. That was the route that I was going to go if I was called to answer that question. But basically, yes, like she said, if you're past W-2 and you have business income, you're an investor, and you don't, even though I worked for the IRS, I don't exactly love, reading tax code all day or reading, tax history and all that stuff. So to have someone who can make sure that as your income is growing, that you're able to take advantage of certain tax breaks, that is definitely, like she said, you're going to want to start looking into someone else to do that for you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of the same thing for me. As a financial advisor, still used an accountant. Just, it's not, tax code changes often. It can get really complicated. You absolutely don't want to be in a situation where you're accidentally paying too much. So
I have CPAs that are my clients, and they have no shame in their game, because again, we all have our lanes, right? I'm not going to try to create a financial plan. That's not what I do. I can tell you the tax implications behind it, but I have 2 financial planners, one for my personal, one for my business, so you want to hire an expert when an expert is needed ultimately. Don't try to be a do-it-yourselfer. That's not how, you can't get far at all if you really want to figure out how you can build wealth. You do want to have a team. It's all about your team.
Yeah, it's really great to have people who can support you, because this stuff gets complicated. So, and if you already have a full-time job, then learning all about this stuff can be really, really demanding. So it's always good to have people on your side who can help support you, to make sure that you're not doing something that's, you wind up paying out money that you shouldn't be paying out or anything like that.
Wise.
All right, next question. I apologize for the delays. I just keep having to shift the chat away from the question so that I can read it off the screen. Okay, so I'd love to know the steps for investing in the stock market. How much should you start investing with? How do I even start my research? Candace, do you want to take a stab?
Yeah, so we talked about, having either your brokerage account or investing within your retirement account. We talked about fractional shares. So you can get started with $25, you absolutely can. And to start with your research. So the way people typically get started, you think about the companies that you're familiar with, right? It doesn't mean that you're going to invest in them, but you think about the companies you're familiar with and I like to take it a step deeper. So, I may think about a household product that I have. Why do I like it? What do I know? What do I understand about this product and how it works? Like, I'm not a tech person, so I'm probably not going to do a whole lot of research on that type of company. But once I make my list of, when I first started, make my list of 5 different companies, why I like these companies, what I know about them, and starting that research there, because since I'm already, in love with this company for whatever reason, I'm going to take my research in that company more serious. And as I learn, then I may start thinking, oh, my knowledge becomes expanded to, okay, it's not really just about the companies that I like, it's the companies that are going to be making money. Okay. So, but when you first get started, that's not really what your mindset is. You're researching the things that you're familiar with. And that's what I mentioned before about the core competency, the things that you're comfortable with. And so that's where I would say start, because I think that's what's going to keep you engaged versus just saying you should be looking into this company because, for whatever arbitrary reason, they do all of the technology stuff, like they create all the CPUs for Tesla. Like, that's probably not going to connect with you on a level that makes you actually want to do that kind of research. So that's why I say, have a list of 5 different companies that you're interested in. And when you start doing your research and expanding your knowledge, then you'll, hopefully be able to start understanding, okay, these are the other things I need to look for, not just the fact that I believe in this company. Like, what are they, if you're a social person, like, or environmentally conscious person, what are they doing for, the environment? What are they doing for other small businesses? What are they doing for less fortunate people? Like, if you care about those kind of things, like, that research tends to come a little bit after.
Absolutely. No, I think that, what?
I said, I hope that makes sense.
I certainly think so. And I mean, to me, it brings to mind something that especially at PowerToFly, where we advocate for a lot of the good stuff, in my opinion, that socially responsible investing is a thing. So as people are looking to start investing, like, Google search socially responsible investing, or ERG investing, which is environment. No, I'm blanking. Governance. No, ESG. No, just go for SRI, socially responsible investing. I can't remember the other acronym right now. But if you're not looking for an individual stock and you're looking for a mutual fund or an ETF, that there are companies that design them to be socially responsible, so that they have to meet certain requirements for how they treat their employees, what they do to the environment, things like that. So definitely worth looking into. Sheneya, did you have anything that you wanted to add on this one? I don't know if we've lost you. All right, that's all right. I had another question come in the chat that I also wanted to ask, which the question itself was, do I need my employer to provide a 401k in order to open one? I know that for me, when I was a financial advisor, I get a lot of questions like IRA, 401k, 403b, what does it all mean? Candace, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, so the 401k is special to employers so they can contribute their matches to them. If you don't have a job that offers a 401k or something like that, then you can absolutely open your own traditional IRA, which is, it mimics a 401k in a lot of different ways. They both have, different rules that the IRS sets for them, but it's that same thing where you put the money in and you get your tax break up front, and then you're expected to pay taxes later on when you take the money out at retirement age. It has, like I said, some other things you can't borrow, with a 401k, you can take out a loan if you need to, but with the traditional 401k, with the traditional IRA, those rules are a little bit different. So, they both, like I said, have their own rules and things, but a traditional IRA is a good option. And you have full control over your investing options within if you open your own traditional IRA, because with the 401k, since it's with your employer, they choose the administrator of the 401k, and it's usually like pre-selected the things that are included that you can invest in, where with the traditional, that's opened by you with, again, another brokerage firm. So Vanguard, Fidelity, things like that. So you have control over what types of things you want to put in or put your money into. And then that further translates into you being able to have more control over your expense ratios. Is what I'm trying to say.
No, and that's I think that's really helpful because it can, all these acronyms, all the numbers, everything, like it's all very overwhelming and confusing. But completely with you. In short, 401k is your retirement option if your employer provides one. If they don't, an IRA is how you do it on your own, or you can do them simultaneously if your employer offers them. But you can't go out and open your own 401k, or you can, but it'd be really hard and complicated, and I don't recommend it. But we did also get the question, and Sheneya, I think that it would be helpful to hear from you for this one, which was to please explain a SEP IRA.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you want to take that one?
Yeah.
Put that right next to the 0.06.
So, essentially, a SEP IRA is one that you get if you are self-employed, right?
Okay, so now if you take.
So, if you are self-employed, you can also opt into getting a retirement account, right? Because it won't be the traditional 401k or SEP IRA, since you are self-employed, right? Typically, again, with 401ks, your employer sponsors. So what you want to do is figure out how to set this up for yourself. The good thing about being an entrepreneur is that when you do set up a SEP IRA, it is a tax deduction on your business, right? Because you are the single entrepreneur. So currently, the max amount that you can get for a SEP IRA is $56,000, right? And that means that you can deduct either $56,000 or 25% of your salary, the lesser of. So if you're a self-employed individual and you want to save on taxes, because SEP IRA is a really good tax planning strategy, you will pay yourself a salary, right? And then depending on what you pay yourself as a salary, we want to take 25% of that to figure out how much you can deduct on your business expenses for SEP IRA. So for my clients who are more established in business, they're able to pay themselves like, $250K a year. Therefore, they're maxing out that $56,000 deduction. So imagine being able to deduct $56,000 from your business income, right? That you're not going to pay taxes on. And it wasn't a wasted expense. What it did was get put towards your future. So it's kind of like a double dip. I deduct the expense now, but it's not a wasted expense. It gets deducted. It gets to grow because it's in an account that's going to grow and benefit me in the future. So I recommend all entrepreneurs to get a SEP IRA account. I don't like when entrepreneurs are not thinking about retirement. We can get so caught up in our day to day that now it's 15 years on the line, and we don't know what we're going to do with retirement. Again, as a job is trading time for money, entrepreneurship is most times trading the same thing, time for money. And unfortunately, if when you want to retire, you don't ever want to retire uncomfortably. And then your entrepreneur, your business cannot sustain your retirement if you're not able to fully work to the capacity that you used to when you were young. So why not protect yourself and get a retirement account? So get that SEP IRA. The good thing, if you speak to a financial planner, they can tell you that there's some other accounts that you can open as well, like an HSA account that can turn into a deduction as well if you need to get health insurance as an entrepreneur as well.
So, thank you, Sheneya. Yeah, I think that it's interesting because once you get into SEP IRAs, simples, like things like that, it can get pretty complicated. But I think the basic, so we're all on the same page, is you work for a company. If they provide you a 401k, you have access to retirement savings, which are tax advantage savings in that method. If you are your own person and you just want to open up an IRA, you can do that. There are different amounts of money you can save each year into each kind of an account. If you don't work for a business and you work for yourself instead, you don't have access to a 401k, but you want to save more than a regular IRA could allow you to. If you work for yourself, you can look at that SEP IRA option, because as Sheneya was saying, you can save a lot more in that way than you could in other ways. But then you actually have to be a business owner in order to do that. So always important to remember that. Then it can get even more complicated beyond that. But I would say at that point, if you're at a point where you're like, hey, I should be thinking about other more complicated things, please talk privately to an accountant, financial advisor, someone, because it just gets hecka complicated. So, but really good question, and happy that we were able to go through that. I think we'll have time for at least one more question. So let's check out what's up next on the docket. Oh, well, there you go. Never mind. Hold on. Let me see if there's another question after that. Just to give fair to all the questions asked, since we've spent some time on IRAs. All right. So this is another good one because we haven't really talked about credit scores. My credit score is super low. What steps can I take to start getting a better credit score? What's the ideal score? Candace, do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, so the biggest component of your credit score what accounts for most of it is your payment history. So that means this person pays as agreed and they pay on time. So paid as agreed means that if your bill each month is supposed to be $100, that you're not paying $50, you're not paying $75, you're paying as you agreed and on time. That's 35% of your credit history. So if that component right there isn't the greatest, then that's the number one thing you need to work on. And right after that, at 30% of your the components that make up your credit score is your utilization. So out of all of your available credit, are you maxed out, right? Because if you are, that's showing other creditors that this person does not manage their debt well or manage their account lines very well. So those are the two biggest things. So making sure that you're paying on time and as agreed, and that your utilization is low, like it's not in the reds. And then the ideal score, 750, I think is good. Some people really want to push, for the 800 or getting past the 800. That's kind of like a personal thing on if if you're expecting a large purchase and you want to have the best interest rates, or if you're just a person who really wants a challenge to get it up or just whatever. But I think, for a lot of people, if they can get, between like 750 and 800, they're pretty happy. And you're still getting good interest rates. And, if you're the type that gets involved in credit card hacking and all those kind of things, you have access to that once you hit a 750-ish area.
I'm looking at the clock. We have 2 minutes left. I would say I'll give you each a minute. If you had one thing that you want people to take away from this, Sheneya, you can go first. What is that thing?
Just because of the current climate of the economy, I will focus on how to monetize, right? I think everyone should be focused on how to get more capital. We don't know what's going to happen, especially with the elections coming up. We don't know if, God forbid, COVID-19 comes back. But what I don't want is for people to be in a place that's uncomfortable again. So whatever you can do, whether it's, making masks or creating an online course to sell or creating an online ebook, depending on your skill, or do virtual tutoring. That's a pretty big growing industry right now. People need help with teaching their kids. Whatever you need to do, I feel like right now is a great time to focus on just gaining more capital. Because again, we just want to be on the right side of the fence if anything happens. And it just brings comfort in your heart and in your mind if you know that you're financially stable.
Awesome. Thank you, Sheneya. Candace, your takeaway message?
Yes, I'm just going to be really brief. This is something that I always say, is that I believe everybody deserves to do more than pay bills and die. So whatever that means for you, if that means that you need to start investing, if that means that you need to start prioritizing savings and debt payoff so you can have more time with your family, or you can, take a sabbatical away from work, things like that. I love that we're having this conversation because these kind of topics are leading beyond just paying bills. So I love that everybody is thinking about that, but that's just something that I like to remind people of. Your future is important. We don't just want to keep paying for our past, right? So that's it.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. I feel like this was just a jam-packed hour of so much good stuff. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you everyone.
So welcome.
Thank you everyone who came and joined us today. Y'all will get a recording so you can come back and rewatch at any point. And, stay tuned for future chat and learns, future good stuff. Always happy to have y'all here. Well, sign off.
It was good. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.